Across Arkansas. My name is Scott Inman. John Shrewsbury to my right, along with Janet Walker. Welcome in, guys, for another edition. Hope you guys are doing okay this morning.
I'm just glad to be out of the house.
Glad to be out of the house. You know,
Yes.
that has become a refrain that I think to myself quite frequently. We are now entering into the 7th week since the beginning, anyway, of the shutdown in the state of Arkansas. And we may see a May 4th date that the light at the end of the tunnel is now there. Governor Hutchinson late last week saying that that is the target to begin to open phase 1, which would be some businesses reopening in Arkansas in some semblance of normal. Obviously, we're a long way out from getting totally back to normal, but I think that is giving some people some hope that have been sitting around in the house and ready to get out and do some things. And obviously the president leading the charge with that phase program, unrolling that earlier before Governor Hutchinson. So I think there is some good news there with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we would say from a market perspective that always has to come with a little bit of caution. The market has bounced back significantly, John, since the lows, or what we have as the lows right now. May not go that far back down. We may not test that low, but I think there's still going to be some volatility because just because we see some light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean there won't be some setbacks along the way.
Yeah, you can just count on that there is always going to be some volatility related to this, because it's not going to be a smooth transition from all these cases happening to no cases happening.
Yeah.
And so, Janet, we've got to be prepared for that. And I know a lot of people are concerned about where we are both short-term and long-term in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that there will likely be a relapse, and so we've got that on the horizon for later on in the year. But then even prior to that, when you talk about your investments and the impact on the market, then when we look at, all right, we've got lots of people not working right now, and even when they do go back to work, there has already been an impact had on those particular businesses. So when they get back to work, okay, great, everybody's doing their job and we all feel good about everything, but then sometime in the third quarter, we get second quarter earnings out, and people are going to feel like they're in a safe place because everybody's back to work, not necessarily because of how the market responds to information.
So we want to ask this morning how you are doing. You mentioned, John, you're glad to be out of the house. A lot of people are ready. They've got that cabin fever. They don't want to do it too soon, but they're ready to get back to work, get back to normal life. We sent a survey out via email to our clients, got a lot of response on that. I mean, people obviously have time to think about how they're doing, but we wanted to kind of gauge that and just check in with our clients as a whole. I mean, we've been also making calls as advisors and talking to them individually, but we wanted to just get a gauge on where they were, and we got a lot of response.
Absolutely. There were about 300 or so responses that we got from this. Most of the 300 plus clients who responded reported that they're doing well, but anxiety is anywhere from moderate to high, and that is to be expected. And there was solid agreement among our client base that some things or everything has changed for them, but also there's a spirit of hope for the future. And those results really dovetail with a national survey that was done for a financial industry trade group called LIMRA, Janet.
Yeah, so in that survey, the number one concern for consumers is the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. So catch that it's not the concern about health or healthcare. And guys, we were talking about that prior to going on the air, that we've got to look at the impact that this is going to have on our nation just from not going to work. And frankly, there is a health impact from people not being able to go to work.
Well, I was on the radio on 103.7 The Buzz earlier this week with Tommy and David and that crew, and I made the point that poverty has killed more people than coronavirus ever will in this world. And we've got to be mindful that poverty has consequences. And that's where some people are headed if we continue to shelter in place. And we've also talked about the fact that there are risks in everything. If you get in the car and drive down the road, there's a risk, but you take that risk because you need the end result of that, whatever that travel is. And so we've got to kind of rethink our risk quotient in this, in terms of what's happening not just on the healthcare side, but on the economic side. And there has to be a balance there, Scott.
I think there are a lot of different levels between total shutdown, lock yourself in your home, and wide open, full throttle normal economy. There are stages, and I like the way that this is rolled out in phases, that you can begin to start to recharge the economy, but still take precautions, especially for those most vulnerable who are most at risk for COVID-19. So those are very interesting results from that nationwide survey. Financial Industry Trade Group LIMRA putting that out. So we'd encourage you to kind of chime in with us today and tell us how you're doing. You can do that on our Facebook Live. Just comment in there. Tell us how, as we begin this 7th week, how are you doing with all of the shutdown and your hope for the future? We're going to take that a step farther in the next couple of segments. We have the great pleasure to be able to be joined by Dr. Wade Pfau. He is definitely one of the leading authorities on retirement income planning in America. So as we kind of talk about how you're doing, some of that for us when we talk to our clients is, how are you feeling about retirement? And some of you who are not clients, how are you feeling about retirement and your prospects for having a plan to retire and then get through retirement as well?
I think this is the geek out session for all of us because this is the guru. This is the guy that really understands, studies, and lives 24/7, 365 retirement income planning. He's in charge of the program that teaches all of us about retirement income planning. So if there is an authority on this, this is the guy.
Yeah, and we're absolutely excited to have Dr. Pfau join us today. And for those of you who have been fans of GenWealth for a long period of time, you will hear an echo in what he's saying because it is the philosophy that we've used for many years.
Absolutely.
You can also mark your calendars. We do have just a few seconds left before we have to take our first break. Want to give in this, too. We have a special online workshop that we've put together to talk about how you can learn and move beyond the effects of COVID-19 in your personal finances, particularly as it relates to your retirement. The date on that special online workshop is Thursday, April 30th, so a week from tomorrow, 7 p.m. We'll present 4 questions we should be asking in light of the pandemic. Our special guest will be Bert White. He is the Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer with LPL Financial. Many of you know who he is. So register online, getreadyforthefuture.com/4questions. And we're back with our interview with Dr. Pfau right after this.
At GenWealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If you ever doubt that, come to my house, listen to my 16-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter having a conversation and see what happens, because they will walk away with completely different understandings of the conversation that has occurred." It happens every time. It's okay, they're still learning communication. But here at GenWealth, we believe that that's something you need to experience every time you walk in our door, that you need to feel understood, that you need to feel listened to. So you'll see a change in how we're even communicating. If you're talking about something that's very serious, very personal, you'll even hear a change in our tone of voice, because that's just how good communication is supposed to be. But it also means that we can feed back to you what you've shared with us, just so you know that we're listening. We value good communication.
Simpler, more personal approach to retirement continues with the Get Ready for the Future show.
I want to mention, too, also we talked about that special online workshop we put together to talk about how you can learn and move beyond the effects of COVID-19, especially as it relates to your retirement. Again, it's Thursday, April 30th at 7 p.m. we're presenting 4 questions we should be asking in light of the pandemic with special guest Bert White. He's the Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer with LPL Financial. I mentioned the website, getreadyforthefuture.com/4questions. But if you're watching today on Facebook, you can also register. You can find a link to register on our Facebook page. Our attendance is limited, so be sure to get your registration in as soon as possible. All right, so it is time now, as we mentioned in the last segment, for our special interview today. Dr. Wade Pfau is joining us today to talk about retirement income. He holds a doctorate in economics from Princeton University, professor of retirement income and co-director of the New York Life Center for Retirement Income at the American College of Financial Services. He's a multi-award-winning retirement authority, author of 3 books on the subject of retirement. It is a pleasure, sir, to welcome you to the Get Ready for the Future show.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start. Obviously, Dr. Pfau, the market reaction to the coronavirus pandemic has not helped anyone's retirement, at least not their retirement assets. But this market disruption does pose some particular problems to near-term retirees. As you see it, what are those issues?
Yeah, there's really 3 issues going on right now for people who are near or at retirement. And it's, of course, the portfolio losses they may have experienced with the market downturn, the fact that it looks like volatility will continue into the future, and it's really unknown what's going to be happening. And then one that's not getting as much coverage, but it's just as important as anything else for retirees, and that's these unbelievably low interest rates that we're now experiencing. That just means the amount of income you can get from a bond portfolio and so forth really isn't all that high these days.
Doctor, there's been an ongoing difference of strategy among practitioners in our profession. On one side, there are those who have said for a long time that you can rely on the returns of an investment portfolio to provide retirement income, the so-called 4% rule. On the other side are those that take a more safety-first approach, using insurance-based investments to supply some basic income. We understand that your position on the 4% rule is it doesn't work anymore.
That's right. The 4% rule, it's based on U.S. historical data. It worked with a lot of assumptions behind it. It worked with U.S. data in the past. But today we're really experiencing market situations that haven't happened before. Interest rates are lower than they've ever been. And at the same time, market valuations, while no longer at record highs, they were until recently, they're still on the high side. And both of these factors just suggest lower returns from investment portfolios in the future. And I got my start with all this looking at how that 4% rule worked with other countries' data and looking at 20 different developed market countries, finding that the 4% rule only worked in 2 of the 20 countries, in the US and Canada. And so there is precedence for this idea that just because this 4% rule worked in US data, it may not work as well in the future. And we're now experiencing situations that have never been tested in the U.S. for the 4% rule.
Dr. Pfau, in light of coronavirus and what you've just talked about with us on the 4% rule as well, what is your thought for those who are considering retirement in 2020? At this point, would you say that they should delay their retirement, consider changing their strategy? What are your thoughts?
Well, delaying retirement is the most powerful way to get a retirement plan back on track. It allows you to earn for longer, save more, have less time where you'll be taking distributions eventually. It can help to delay Social Security benefits. So if that is an option for individuals, that is certainly worth considering. We do have this tragedy now where a lot of people may be involuntarily forced to retire sooner than planned. And so the idea of delaying retirement may not be an option for them. But if it is, yeah, that's certainly the starting point for a discussion about how to get a retirement plan back on track.
We are talking to Dr. Wade Pfau. He holds a doctorate in economics from Princeton University and is a professor of retirement income. That's something that we build for our clients, retirement income plans here at GenWealth. And he's joining us on the Get Ready for the Future show to talk about this scenario, which is, I think, been maybe put more under the spotlight with this pandemic now, with folks' portfolios going down. We talked a little bit there in that last question, Dr. Pfau, about those considering retiring this year. Let's kind of expand that a little bit into more of a 5 to 10 year look. Historically, Americans have certainly not been as committed to saving as much money as they should for retirement. So when you talk about what you've already spoken to us about, the low interest rates, the market volatility, portfolio values going down, and tie that into the fact that they may not be prepared from a savings perspective anyway, they are looking at retiring on a constrained amount of money if they don't have much time left to do anything about it. So what about those who are underfunded going into retirement? What are their options?
Well, people need to get more creative in this regard, because one thing to be clear about with something like the 4% rule is the logic behind it is you really have to save more for retirement, because you have to plan for, well, what if I do live a very long time? And what if I do get below average market returns in my retirement? I just have to save excessively to make sure I don't outlive my assets. And there's other things that can be incorporated to help not have to take on all that risk yourself, whether it's thinking about lifetime income protections from things like annuities, where you can spend at a higher level because you know you're part of this risk pool that those who end up not needing as much to fund their retirement will help to subsidize those who do need more to fund their retirement. It also can involve things that are called buffer assets that are outside the portfolio that can just help avoid taking distributions from the investments after a market downturn, because that really can help manage these retirement risks to help extend the longevity of your assets when you're not having to sell them at losses. And so that can be things like a reverse mortgage or life insurance, or just having cash on the side as well. And also just being able to make small cuts to spending during market downturns can also go a long way towards helping to preserve the investment assets and not having to be as conservative as necessary if you're really just trying to manage a fixed spending level over an unknown length of time with a volatile investment portfolio.
Doctor, we at GenWealth have always been education-driven and strategy-based in what we do with our clients. We believe that clients need to have a high quality of education about what they're doing, and there always has to be a strategy behind that. And as a result of all of that, one of the things that we have always focused our clients on is something that we call the retirement red zone. It is that critical period in the 5 to 10 years before retirement and then the 5 to 10 years after retirement, where a retiree stands a greater chance of running out of money if they take bad returns during those times. What are the lessons of this pandemic in regard to something like the retirement red zone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that concept is something that I've tried to quantify as well, and it's indeed true. It's the first year of retirement that market return is the most important market return in somebody's financial lifetime. And so it is the people who are close to retirement today that are most affected by this. And so at least some relief that comes from all that is for younger people who are still at least further away from retirement. The market downturn isn't necessarily going to be as disruptive to their lifetime financial plans. And also for those who are later into retirement, who may have been spending conservatively throughout their retirements, for the early parts of their retirements, they've seen market growth, and so they may be better positioned today to be able to weather this downturn. But it's those people who are closest to retirement that are the most impacted by what's going on today.
I want to pick up on that just a little bit, because I was around in 2008 when we went through the financial crisis, and I still am haunted by the fact that young and middle-aged people during that particular period of time, and Janet is nodding her head right now in agreement with what I'm about to say, young and middle-aged people stopped putting money into their 401k plan because they were convinced that it was a bad investment. And we've seen the results of that over time. But from your perspective, Doctor, that's obviously got to be something that keeps you awake at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can see these generational effects where people are really impacted by, if they had a negative experience in their early investing years, that can really change their perspective. And so, yeah, a lot of young people were scared away from the stock market after the financial crisis. And indeed, just mathematically, the point still stands that those market returns don't really matter. It's, in some sense, a buying opportunity. You get to buy assets at a discount to fund your investment portfolio. But that's not really how people tend to think about it. And so that is a concern, that especially in a low interest rate environment, people think of bonds as being safe. but they're really not safe, and they don't provide inflation protection, and it just requires so much savings to try to fund a retirement with very little planned growth that the bonds can provide in this low interest rate environment.
Dr. Pfau, you mentioned annuities a little bit earlier, but I want to develop that a little bit more than what we have so far. Annuities obviously have, people who are fans of them and people who frankly just hate them. And we want to discuss that a little bit more. You've been a very strong advocate for using annuities as the foundation of a retirement strategy. What would you say is the academic basis for your thought process on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so academics tend to like annuities, and it's because they pool these risks. And we can think about this. Social Security is an annuity. For traditional company pensions, they're annuities. People could get a defined amount of spending power based on their work histories, and they didn't have to worry about investing on their own. They didn't have to worry about this sequence of returns risk, this idea that it's the market returns right at their retirement date that matter the most. And they didn't have to worry about planning that they might live to 95 or 100 because they have this risk pool that allows everyone to spend at the same level because they're pooling these market risks and these longevity risks. And that's what, in today's world where more and more people are using 401k plans to fund their retirements, they can replace the idea of a traditional pension by purchasing an annuity. That is the same concept. It allows people to pool the risk of market volatility and of longevity so that they can plan and spend at a level like they'll live more to an average lifetime and not have to be overly conservative because they're worried about outliving their assets.
Dr. Wade Pfau is our guest today on the Get Ready for the Future show, professor of retirement income, multi-award-winning retirement authority, and author of 3 books on the subject of retirement. We are walking up on a commercial break, so we're going to take a time out and be back with more with Dr. Pfau. I do want to take a moment to remind you we have waived our financial planning fees for folks 55 and up during this pandemic time who are facing retirement during the challenging time in the markets and the economy. You can call our office at 501-653-7355 to take advantage of that offer, and we'll talk more with Dr. Pfau when we return in just a moment.
A game warden noticed how a particular fellow named Sam consistently caught more fish than anyone else. The successful fisherman invited the game warden to come along with him and observe. So the next morning, the two fellows met at the dock and took off in Sam's boat. When they got to the middle of the lake, Sam stopped the boat and the warden sat back to see how it was done. Sam's approach was really simple. He took out a stick of dynamite, lit it, and threw it in the air. The explosion rocked the lake with such a force that dead fish immediately began to surface. Sam took out a net and started scooping them up. Well, you can imagine the reaction of the game warden. When he recovered from the shock of it all, he began yelling at Sam. He said, "Hey, buddy, you can't do this. I'll put you in jail. You'll be paying every fine there is in the book." The game warden was just incredulous. Sam, meantime, just simply set down his net, took out another stick of dynamite. He lit it, tossed it, this time in the lap of the game warden, with these words, "Are you going to sit there all day complaining, or are you going to fish?" For some of us, the same question could be asked about our retirement. This is John Shrewsbury with GenWealth Financial Advisors. Whether it's trying to find the best investment or just worrying about the stock market, a lot of folks seem frozen with retirement indecision, and that very well could lead to an explosion of your own, an explosion of your dreams for a comfortable future. Plan now for your time on the lake or wherever your dreams take you.
We're back with more straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money on the Get Ready for the Future show.
Welcome back to the Get Ready for the Future show and our special conversation with Dr. Wade Pfau. He is a professor of retirement income, and he is a multi-award-winning retirement authority, author of 3 books on the subject of retirement. We wanted to have him on especially during this time with the COVID-19 pandemic, I know creating a lot of fear for near-term retirees as they think about living on their nest egg for the rest of their lives. So we wanted to bring him in and provide some insight on retirement planning and specifically as it relates to getting income out of your life savings. So, Dr. Pfau, we had talked in the past segment about annuities, and we do want to take a moment to mention that we are not making a recommendation of an annuity to any particular person today. You need to meet with an advisor to determine your situation. But in this environment, are there types, when you look at the types of annuities that are out there, there are many. You can look for highest payout. You can look for something that's going to be more focused on investment performance. Are there types of annuities that you feel work best?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of flexibility there with different types of annuities. The simple income annuity tends to offer the highest payout and may be a good option for people who at this point they've had enough of the stock market. And this is the tragedy that happens, that people tend to sell at lows and may never get back into the market again. And just bonds are such an inefficient way to try to fund a retirement. And so something like a simple income annuity for part of those assets that would otherwise be sitting in bonds can be very powerful. And for people who may be worried about the stock market but are not completely giving up on it, that's where something like a variable annuity could still play a role, because it allows you to still invest in the stock market. But if you add living protections to have lifetime income, you'll have protection from the downside, where spending can't drop any lower, even if the stock market continues going down. But you still have the ability where if the stock market recovers, you can benefit from some of that upside as well.
Dr. Pfau, in talking about variable annuities, it comes to mind that some people, when they hear that you can invest in the market but still have guaranteed income, they say, well, that sounds too good to be true. I say it's too good to be free, but it's not too good to be true. And secondly, I think that a lot of people are wondering about the asset allocation inside those annuities. How important is it to have, number one, control of that asset allocation, and secondly, to have the investment freedom to be looking at a heavier equity portfolio than maybe some other types of annuities?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that investment freedom can be very important. And so a lot of my answers start from what the math shows. And the math about the variable annuity is, because you have the downside protection, you should invest as aggressively as you possibly can. And so if you can go 100% in very volatile investments, mathematically, that's the way to go. Now, that creates more risk for the insurance company. And so some insurance companies will limit how aggressive you can be. And so if you're not really going to follow that mathematical advice anyway and not be as aggressive, it may still be okay to use one that does limit the aggressiveness of the underlying assets. But yeah, that's the way to think about it. When you have downside protection, that even if the market goes down, your spending is protected. You might as well go for all the upside that you can, and that's the starting point.
Janet, I think we kind of geeked out a little bit there. As I said, we really enjoy talking about this because this is our craft, and right. It's something that we try to convey on a regular basis to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as I said earlier, I think those who have been listening to the show for a long period of time are probably feeling like they're hearing an echo at this point, because Dr. Pfau's philosophy, it really is very much the same as what we have talked about over the years. Dr. Pfau, Congress has, over the decades, created really just a veritable alphabet soup of retirement plans and lots of rules and everything that go along with the different types of plans. There has been a move to allow withdrawals for many reasons that really have nothing to do with retirement. And this was really already happening a great deal before coronavirus. And then obviously there's been pretty much unfettered access created this year due to COVID-19. COVID-19. But what is your opinion, even outside of COVID-19, what is your opinion as far as the current state of retirement in America and people being able to use those assets for non-retirement purposes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a troubling situation just because those assets are meant to be people's retirement plans. And by giving, I mean, I can understand, especially with what's going on right now, people may need access because they have no other alternative. But really, spending your retirement assets before retirement should be the last resort option. As much as possible, try to avoid having to do that because that's your retirement money. And if you're spending it now, it's not going to be available in the future.
We are talking with Dr. Wade Pfau. He is the author of 3 books on the subject of retirement, a professor of retirement income. If you are just joining us on the radio side or on our live stream this morning and want to see the complete interview, you can always check us out on podcast later or watch the complete replay on our Facebook page of today's Get Ready for the Future show. So as we talk a little bit more about retirement here, Dr. Pfau, we talk to our clients a lot about how the plan should dictate the investment strategy. We don't recommend investments on the first appointment. We talk about building that retirement income plan, and that is still, from our experience, an unusual concept from the past advice that they have received at other firms. You had some cautionary words for advisors in a recent Think Advisor interview where you said essentially that the traditional advice for retirement isn't going to work for today's retiree. Can you elaborate on that, please?
What I meant by that is just there's still many financial advisors who really view themselves as investment managers. And so their job is to put together a portfolio for their clients. And that's the end of the story. And pre-retirement, I don't think that ever made sense, but at least it was a little more justifiable because, well, you're really just trying to grow the pot of assets for future use. But once people get to retirement, that investment style approach doesn't really apply anymore because people now have to fund distributions. They have to spend over their retirements. And there's a whole new set of risks that we talked about these risks already, that not knowing how long the money needs to last and how market volatility, what we talked about with that retirement red zone, market volatility has a bigger impact when you're retired. And so you have to think about it differently than just a traditional investment portfolio. And that's where advisors who haven't really been thinking about retirement income as something distinct from traditional wealth management are really missing the boat and aren't going to be able to help their clients achieve successful retirement outcomes unless you just get lucky with the good market returns. But we don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Dr. Pfau, let me put you in your professor role at this point and get you to explain something to our listeners. You referenced reverse dollar cost averaging. Obviously, we're familiar with what that term is, but when you talk about people withdrawing from their retirement assets in light of this volatile time, we have to make an assumption that the majority of our listeners don't understand what that risk really entails. Would you elaborate on what that impact can be for people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the idea that it's the market returns early in retirement that really matter. And actually that what happens in the markets later in your retirement doesn't really have much impact either way. And it's this idea that if I'm trying to meet a spending goal and markets go down, I now have to spend a higher percentage of what's left to meet my goal. And that starts to dig a hole for my portfolio where the market returns need to be at least that high to avoid further depleting my assets. And they would have to be even higher to try to recover from any sort of market downturn. And so it's this idea that markets go up and down. And if the market recovers, that's great. But for somebody who's now retired and has been spending, they don't get to enjoy the market recovery for their portfolio. They can start digging a hole for that portfolio. And that's this idea of it's called reverse dollar cost averaging, sequence of returns risk. It has different names, but it's this idea that it's the first 5 or 10 years of retirement that are really what happens in the financial markets is really going to drive the success of that retirement outcome. And what happens later on doesn't have as much impact.
Just a couple of minutes left, Dr. Pfau. I wanted to just focus on what's happened over time. In my career, in over 30 years in this business, I've seen pensions go away in the private sector, and the shift has been over to 401k plans. And so what we have really admonished our clients about is that, you have to fend for yourself when it comes to retirement, but not go it alone. Speak, if you will, as a professor who trains financial advisors in this area. Speak about the value of a financial advisor in particularly retirement income planning.
Well, retirement income planning gets more complicated. And so a good financial advisor who's doing more than just building the investment portfolio can really add a lot of value, both on the psychological side of helping people stick with their strategies and to not panic during this kind of market volatility and so forth. But also there's a lot more beyond that in terms of having a tax efficient strategy. A lot of people just don't realize you have these options between traditional IRAs or 401ks, between Roth style accounts, and then between taxable accounts. And by being smart about where you position your assets between the different accounts and how you decide which order you're going to spend from those accounts, that can have a huge impact on the success of the retirement plan, as well as when to claim Social Security, how to manage decisions around Medicare and health insurance in retirement, long-term care. The list goes on and on. There's so much that a financial advisor who's really a good financial planner helping to make decisions along all these categories can add so much more value. And it goes beyond just building an investment portfolio.
Dr. Wade Pfau, our guest today, professor of retirement income. And Dr. Pfau, we've mentioned that you are an author of 3 books. We do have about a minute left. I do want to ask you about the titles of those books and how people can find a copy if they want to read more.
Oh, well, thanks. So the books are all on Amazon, or you could also go to my website, retirementresearcher.com. And the 3 books, they're about the different approaches to retirement. At least 2 of them are. So Safety First Retirement Planning is more about how you blend investments and insurance, like annuities, to build a retirement plan. The book, How Much Can I Spend in Retirement, is more about just an investments only approach for people who, as you said, some people just hate annuities. So that book is about, well, what would you do if you're not going to think about using insurance as part of the planning process? And then I also have a book about reverse mortgages, which is an interesting tool that can be incorporated in a number of different ways in a retirement plan as well.
Very good. Dr. Pfau, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate both segments that you spent with us today on our program.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The Get Ready for the Future show will continue right after this.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At GenWealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. GenWealth Financial Advisors.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at GenWealth and harness the power of more.
There are a ton of financial resources on GetReadyForTheFuture.com. No? Well, bookmark that page for later, because the Get Ready for the Future show is back.
Our final segment this morning. Again, thank you for watching on Facebook Live. If you are watching there and would like to comment with a question or just a comment, you can do that. We will like to read it on the air. We thank you to everyone who's been watching there today. And our thanks once again to Dr. Wade Pfau for joining us on the program, an in-depth interview from the academic side, the math. He mentioned math many times, and we've talked about that on the program, that this is a math and science game, when it comes to retirement income planning. And I like what he said in one of his last answers to one of our questions. He said the focus on traditional wealth management instead of retirement income planning, this is by advisors, that they are missing the boat and it doesn't work unless you get lucky. That's what he said. And you don't really want to pin your retirement hopes on getting lucky.
Well, and my takeaway from this was that you could choose safety as far as your retirement income is concerned, or you could choose probability. Now, those probabilities are going to depend on how well or how poorly the market performs in the future. And we have never wanted to leave that to chance. We think retirement is way too important for it to be a probability thing. Think about this. If you walked out of your house and they said, oh, there's a 70% probability you're going to make it to your destination, would you go? Probably not. Probably not. I'd probably stay at the house.
If I was in quarantine for another 7 weeks, I might.
Yeah, you might. That's probably true. Depends on how long you've been in quarantine. But here's the point. You don't want to have a 30% chance of failure in retirement. That's just too big. You just don't want to have that. And so when you think about safety first, you think about making it to your destination with all likelihood intact. And I think, Janet, one of the things that I think is a takeaway from this is that, Dr. Pfau really is kind of the resource that we have used as we created GenWealth Financial Advisors. And we did a ton of research on this subject of retirement income planning because we wanted to get it right. Way back in the beginning, we wanted to get it right. And it's not that he's validating what we're doing. We're just following what is the math and science of retirement income planning.
Right. It's so important to just take the emotion out of this entire conversation and just say, look, we have to have a written retirement plan that addresses a worst case scenario. Speaking of worst case scenario, I love what he was talking about in having looked at 20 developed countries and testing this 4% withdrawal rate that so many people rely upon for their retirement income planning. And in 2 countries, that being the United States and Canada, it worked. In the other 18, it did not. You don't need to be in a position where your retirement income is dependent upon a rule that doesn't work in 90% of the developed countries when you look back historically, because what's it going to look like here in the United States when we look forward? That's a backward-looking test. It worked then. Will it work moving forward? You need a plan that doesn't care about the 4% withdrawal rule. You need a plan that will work under any circumstances.
Scott, I think about that good old Southern phrase or expression, I have a feeling. And usually when you have a feeling, you get in trouble because emotions lead you down the wrong path. It causes you to do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason. That is a consistent theme throughout retirement planning, is that emotions get you in trouble. And so when you begin to think about how you're going to do your retirement and you're relying on emotion and gossip, so to speak, as opposed to the math and science, that is where you get into a higher probability of failure in retirement, in my opinion, because I think that you've got to base this on math and science because it's way too important to base it on anything else.
You tend to go to extremes when you base it on a feeling, right?
Yes.
So if your portfolio goes down and you're in retirement right now and your portfolio went down 20% because of what's happening with this pandemic, what's your response going to be? It's either going to be sell at the wrong time, get out of the market, or it's going to be really pull in the reins on what you're spending, right? And be too fearful to have any kind of a consistent income. That changes when you have it on paper on purpose. You can kind of remove the feeling out of that. You have a very definitive retirement income plan, and that is how we go through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process here. We build the plan first, as I mentioned in the interview. The plan comes before the investment strategy. The plan dictates the investment strategy. And we have waived our financial planning fees during this time for folks 55 and up who are facing retirement in the near term, less than a decade more than likely, during this challenging time with the COVID-19 pandemic and the way the markets are reacting. You can call our office and set up an appointment with one of our GenWealth advisors and get that financial planning done for free if you're 55 or older. And only one member of the couple needs to be 55 and older to qualify. You can pick up the phone right now, 501-653-7355, or you can also reach out via email, info@getreadyforthefuture.com. And this offer lasts through June 30th, so it's not going to be around forever, but we've recognized the need for folks to have this if they are on the precipice of retirement. And quite frankly, the vital time that they are in, we don't want anyone to have to make a poor decision that could really wreck their retirement.
Yeah, your decision making right now is critical, and that's why we're doing this. And we are fully involved in the whole technology thing where we can do online meetings with you, where it's just like you watching us on Facebook Live right now if you are doing that. So it would be a private meeting that we would do over one of the video systems and be able to converse with you about your situation. We'll be able to electronically get your information and begin to build a plan. Then we will send that plan to you and go over it with you in a second appointment. And so it is no different than if we were meeting in person. The only thing that's missing here is the handshake, and they are telling me these days that the handshake is going to be passé anyway. So not that I agree with that, but I think that that the key here is that we're going to do everything that we can to be sure that we get this done in a very accurate way, but also respect your safety and respect your health, so you don't feel like you have to get out of the house and come see us and that type of thing. And Janet, we may have some news on that in the next week or so about how we may be opening our offices back up, kind of dependent upon what the governor has to say and that type of thing. We want to be sure to abide by the regulations that are put forth, but at the same time, we know that people have got to make decisions, and if it's a in-person meeting, heck, I'll put a mask and a gown on and a face shield or whatever I got to do to help you be sure that you don't make a mistake in retirement. We'll get that done.
Well, and the other thing that we've talked about is it's easy also to do a meeting in some of our conference rooms because it's a large area and we can spread out. You know, if there's a table for 10 people, we can do that. We can accommodate you in that way. So we just want you to understand that we know that it's important for you to get your retirement game plan together. Dr. Pfau talked about the importance of those final years before retirement and the early years in retirement. And if things go wrong during that time, it can really completely derail your retirement income. And so we want to be sure that before you cross that path, that you have your retirement plan together. So just give us a call, 501-653-7355. This financial plan normally has a value of approximately $1,000. And again, as Scott mentioned, we're waiving that through June 30th.
Scott, I know people who have listened to our show before have heard our story of the worst appointment that we ever had, and that was literally a lady that we'll call Linda. Back in 2000, she was not our client. She was a client of another financial advisor who was basically just doing investments for her. And she went through 2001, 2002, and 2000, 2001, and 2002, the worst 3 years that we've ever had in the market. And she went from having about $1.3 million to when we met her in 2007, she had about $300,000. And she was on her way to being broke in retirement. I think that is emblematic of what could happen if you make the wrong decision at the wrong time for the wrong reason and rely on emotion as opposed to fact, math, and science when it comes to your retirement income plan.
And her portfolio was in stocks, basically, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so she had not been involved in any kind of retirement income planning, but back to that traditional wealth management. That's what it basically was for her.
Absolutely.
There is the bell. That's the end of our program, or close to the end of our program. It is the sign to us that it is time to wrap up. Do want to take a moment before we go to remind you again of our special online workshop that we've put together. That is coming up next Thursday, April 30th at 7 p.m. We're calling it 4 Questions we should be asking, in light of the pandemic, we are going to be pleased to be joined by Bert White. He is the Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer with LPL Financial. He's been with us on the program before. He's been in for a workshop before, but we're not going to make him come in for this one. He's going to be online with us. We're going to do this over video conferencing. If any of you have done a Zoom video conference or Ring Central, those type of things, you've done this before. It's very easy to join and very easy to sign up. We do need you to do that, though. If you want to be a part of this, you can go to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com/4questions, and be ready to be registered for that event. Space is limited, so we want you to be sure to get in on that. You only have about a week to do so. And then, of course, one more reminder as well that we've waived our financial planning fees for folks 55 and up who are facing retirement during this challenging time in the markets and the economy. 2 ways to reach out to us there. You can phone 501-653-7355, or you can send us an email, info@getreadyforthefuture.com. Again, if one of the members of the couple, one of the spouses in the couple is 55 and up, you qualify. You don't both have to be 55 and up. We put it there because that is that, as you alluded to, John, the retirement red zone. You're about 10 years or so away from retirement. And once you're 10 years or less, it becomes critical, as Dr. Pfau confirmed, that you have a different strategy in place.
My takeaway for this show is turn off the crap on TV.
Please, yeah.
and watch this webinar coming up next week. You'll spend an hour and get way more out of that than you will some news channel that says, hey, we're all going to hell in a handcart. Turn off the TV, join the webinar.
That's it for this week's show. We'll see you again next week.
The GenWealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. GenWealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.